Welcome to The Access. I'm your host, Hayvi Bouzo. In this episode, we'll be discussing the Trump administration's policy towards the Iranian regime, the latest U.S. sanctions put in place, and the different Iranian opposition groups, both inside and outside of Iran. To talk about all of this, we are joined by retired U.S. General Vallely joining us from Montana, and John Naimi, chairman of the Coalition of Iranian Opposition Groups, joining us from Florida. Thank you so much, General Vallely and John, for joining us from different states. General from California, John from Florida. I want to start by asking you, was the sanctions against the Iranian regime, in your opinion, under the Trump administration, as powerful or as with the maximum pressure that we all heard that we're going to be seeing against the Iranian regime? Let's start with you, General.
Well, thank you for the question. We're very happy to be on your show today as guest. And I am from Montana Broadcasting. So with that, let's look at the situation as it was. President Obama basically gave billions of dollars in cash to the regime in Tehran. And what they did with it was to continue to support international terrorism, build up their military, fund their proxies such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and also their effect of what's going on in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And so they've been very active with the money that they've been able to get. President Trump took immediate action to disengage from that Iran treaty and apply sanctions. And now the main effort seems to be sanctions as well as surveillance and intelligence operations going on in the Persian Gulf area. So with that, that sort of sets the stage of where the United States is today. But I think we'll be taking more aggressive action in the future, and we can talk about that a little later if you'd like.
What do you think, John? I mean, I kind of wanted to see if you think this administration is actually maximizing the pressure against the Iranian regime at this point.
Well, I'm very glad that this is not Hossein Obama's regime that to help the terrorist mullah and pay them $150 billion to support their terrorism in Yemen, in Beirut, and in Syria. And this is the time at President Trump in the United States that he's very serious about this issue, that he's going to take care of this nonsense in the Middle East. And I believe that the administration is working on getting that tumorous cancer out of the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. But when we talk, and I want to hear from both of you, General Vallely, do you think the Trump administration's pressure is as intense as you would have wanted to see?
Well, we've got a lot to make up in supporting particularly the people inside Iran, and we need to be much more aggressive in that area. Though we're broadcasting daily from different broadcasting areas and stations into Iran. Even the Iranian opposition is doing the same out of Europe and in the United States. But now with the new coalition that's been established between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States, now we must be more aggressive in nature to assist the Iranian people particularly and indicate support of the United States to the expatriates that live in many countries outside of Iran who want to see a new, free, and democratic society and government in Tehran. The mullahs, this tyrannical regime, tyrannical Islamic regime, has caused so much death and destruction that it's going to take several decades to repair. But they need to have a new government, and of course that's what the Iranian opposition forces and coalition is all about.
Mm-hmm. What about you, John? Did you hope to see more? There were the waivers that we saw with this new set of sanctions against the Iranian regime, which really kind of helped the Iranian regime get away with the main buyers of the Iranian oils for at least the next 6 months.
Well, this sanction that the United States put on Iran is really breaking the back of the mullahs and the Sepah Pastaran. And I believe that the coalition that we create is very well done inside of Iran and is supposed to get more of the coalition inside of Iran and get the people together to be united and go against this regime. And after 4 decades that this regime is brutally killing and torturing people in Iran, this should be the end of it. And this sanction is working very well. And I'm very glad that the U.S. make that decision to do that to these mullahs.
Do you think, General, that the United States can do more to basically strangulate this regime? Because when we look at the financial situation, I mean, obviously they're struggling right now economically, but that's not going to be enough to topple the regime in Iran, is it?
No, you have to have the people in an uprising, just as Khomeini launched in 1979 to replace the Shah. So a revolution must occur. Hopefully it can be a peaceful one, but it's going to take the people inside. And that's where we have to place the emphasis, not only from our coalition that is supported, but also the administration, also countries in Europe and other countries as well. Because if we don't team together in some way to unify and to support the people inside and outside Iran who are supporting, basically a new government. But now you have Iran very much on the offensive. They have formed a new coalition with Pakistan, China, and in part with that Afghan area over there, which includes Turkey, by the way. So the mullahs are not being lazy or not being in a situation where they're not doing anything. They're actually extending their reach, and so we can do more to offset that, but we've got to be more aggressive. And that would be my position. And they've appointed a new individual in the State Department, Brian Hooks, to head up that effort. But we don't see much happening now from the administration. I think a lot dealing with the politics in America now. But maybe after the first of the year, we will see some more positive offensive type operations going on to support the people inside Iran.
Did you say that Brian Hook was a good choice, or?
I don't know. I don't know him, but he was selected by Secretary Pompeo to handle the Iranian desk and come up with a strategy. Now, our CIOG, the Coalition of Iranian Opposition Groups, have provided a strategy policy paper, not only to President Trump, but to John Bolton, National Security, as well as Secretary Pompeo. And so we've given them an outline of what the policy strategy should be to bring regime change inside of Iran. But that's got to be strengthened. We need to have meetings with our government officials, because our coalition has the historical background and historical evidence and facts of what's going on. Even current intelligence today, we're processing and giving to the CIA as well as to the Department of Defense in a lot of the efforts we have in the media, as well as direct policy matters in the form of policy papers submitted to CIA, State Department, Defense Department, National Security Council, as well as President Trump. So we're hoping our efforts are going to be followed to a great degree, because we have the intellectual property, if I may call it that, of what's actually happening in Iran today. And I'm not sure our intelligence agency has all that information that we have.
If you would tell us a little bit, John, about what's in that document that you're trying to promote within the American administration from CIOG, if you can tell us a little bit more about what you're presenting to the administration.
Absolutely. The coalition of Iranian opposition groups has been very active inside of Iran for the past 2 years, and is connecting all of the Baluchis, Kurds, Turkmen, Azeris, and Bakhtiaris groups of the people together. And this coalition was able to bring everybody under one roof in Georgetown University June 9th of 2018. And the coalition put a very big force behind this regime that to get rid of this regime as soon as is possible. But we still need more support from the entire world, not only United States, but also the European Union. And the coalition of Iranian opposition groups is making a appointment to meet with the European Parliament to go to the next step. And I believe within the very short period, the coalition is going to be able, with the help of the entire world, to get this regime out of the Middle East and get not only Iran free of this regime, but the whole Middle East and Europe and United States. This regime is very brutal and expanding their mosques and operating on the mosque. And we have to stop this as soon as possible. And like I said before, this is not Hossein Obama's White House anymore. This is President Trump, and a lot of going on at this.
You know, I just want to say that I'm happy to have you guys. You know, we haven't had people from CIOG before, and I've heard from many Iranians and experts in Washington that, you know, you obviously are connected also to the prince, Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the Shah. And why are you guys not as active in the media as, for example, Mujahideen Khalq are?
Well, go ahead, John, and then I'll follow you.
I want to hear from both of you. So
we were working underground for many years, and so in the past 7-8 months, we come out from underground because of the security. Now, at this time, the coalition is very successful and having roots all over Iran, and we are waiting for a due date to announce that due date. And just like it's happened in 1979, that Khomeini says everybody together, we have to get the Iranian people all together, just like what's happened with General in Mes. They get rid of Mr. Marsi so easy. So is the power of people that is supposed to work, and we are waiting for that day.
General Vallely, you know, are you advising CIOG? Why did you choose to collaborate with them and not with the other Iranian opposition?
Well, no, I have worked. I worked with the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Haq, for about 6 years. I helped a book be published by the MEK called The Iran Threat back in the early 2000s. So I've been involved with opposition groups now probably for about 12 to 13 years.
Wow.
But let me emphasize one of the things that John has said, and I am advising them, by the way, another retired gentleman myself. But what John said is very important to understand. Iran is just not the Persians. And when you brought up the Shah's son, the prince, they're called monarchists, and they are a portion that's still supported by some inside and outside Iran to a degree. But the greater part are the other groups, the Baluchis, okay, the Azeris, the Awazis, the Kurds, and the Azerbaijans. So when you have that, actually the pure Persian population is a much smaller percentage of the total population when you add in all those other cultural groups. So the CIOG is pulling together all of those groups, and I've been working with them on funding as well as structure for the organization so we can be more effective, for example, to President Trump and the U.S. government of actually what needs to be done, how to do it, and provide them intelligence that we're getting from inside Iran of what's happening there. And that's very important because intelligence will drive everything to know what's happening so that the European powers, as well as America, can put together an achievable policy plan that will seek a new and free democracy in Tehran. And that's the mission.
When you talk about, providing information, how much does CIOG really have presence on the ground in Iran? Because we know that the protesters now basically are not very organized. They're coming out from the rural areas, which usually are the supporters of the Iranian regime. They are the hardworking, low-class income families.
Well, that's not the case. You see more students now. Over 60% of the population in Iran is under 30 years old. So you see a lot of student demonstrations going on, as well as out in the outlying areas, protesting, particularly the Awazis down in the area bordering Iraq, where Iran has been selling their water over into Iraq and limiting what can be done by the native Iranians in that area. If you can picture it on a map between Iran and Iraq, just north of the Persian Gulf. But John can tell you that the people inside of Iran not only are academics, they're legal, they're ex-military, they're farmers, peasants, as well as the students. So those are the entities inside Iran that need to be supported, and we can do that with the proper funding.
Can you tell us, John, about, you basically are trying to say that we need to get everybody together to, help the country basically survive the mullahs and basically topple the regime of the Iranian regime at this point. But some people are saying that what's going to happen if this continues and escalates is that Iran, as the general just said, there's many minorities in Iran and many religious and ethnic groups. Wouldn't you be worried that this is going to lead to the collapse of Iran as a country, which is actually what the Iranian regime threatens the people with right now?
Well, that's the point, that we are trying to create a coalition together that at the due date time, they can get together with the minimum expense of the human life, that we can change this regime. And at this time, coalition have all the Baluchis, Kurds, Turkmen, Azaris, Bakhtiaris, and many other group of the people. And also we have all the students, truck drivers. There are the people that they work on the Haftape sugar company that they've been on a strike for 28 days now. And since December of 2017, the people are out in the street, and I don't believe that they're going to go back home until they get rid of that regime. And we are working on that every day, 18 hours a day, to be able to get to the day that we can be successful and get these mullahs out of the way of the people of Iran. And also, they have over 120,000 students, young girl and young boy, in prison, and they rape them, they torture them, and we would like to ask the entire world that where is the human right? Where is the United Nations? What's happened to the human right that we have all these kids, 16 years old kids, they've been raped by this present gods. So we need the help from all over the world, especially on the human right aspect of it. And the CIOG is doing everything in their power to bring that freedom to Iranian people in a very short period of time.
It's true, and actually I want to talk about this point because I had a guest previously on the show from the Federation for Defense of Democracies who was talking about this specific issue, is that this administration is not focusing enough on the human rights violation aspect of the Iranian regime, which is what John was just talking about. How much more can we do to kind of shed light on this tragedy, the ongoing tragedy inside of those detention centers inside of Iran? It's a nightmare.
Well, it's not only the... Go ahead, John.
When President Trump came to the office, Nikki Haley was really pushing this issue of human rights in Iran very well, but I don't understand what's happened that all of a sudden everybody stopped. So we have to ask the United Nations to get on their job, do their job, and do the human rights issues with especially the Iranian people, and get Iranian Sepah Pastaran and the Basijis out of Yemen, out of Syria, out of Lebanon, and leave the Israel alone. And these people, God knows what they're doing in there, but the world has to get together and stop this nonsense of the mullahs.
What would you say, General, about this issue?
Well, it's not the United States' responsibility, number one. We're just one country. But if you look at the United Nations, like John's explained, Nikki Haley's been very strong on the human rights, but we don't. 80% of the countries don't support the United States, yet we provide most of the money. That's why I've recommended they move the United Nations to Athens, Greece. It'll help out their economy. Get them out of the United States, because they're very ineffective in what they do. They do good relief operations and so on, but as far as when it comes to national and international security matters, they're very weak. And very weak on human rights issues, particularly inside Iran. So I don't want to lay everything on President Trump and everything on the United States' responsibility. Other countries in the Middle East, at least Saudi Arabia is standing up to it. So from that standpoint, we have Israel involved, and you have a mounting pressure coming from southern Lebanon now. So what I'm saying, we tend to look and say, well, what's the United States doing, or what aren't they doing? Well, at least we're doing something, and many other countries aren't. What's France doing? What's England doing? What are the other European countries doing? And I can tell you, not very much compared to.
Yes, General, I want to have a follow-up with you, because we just talked about the threat of the Iranian regime, always threatening its people. If you continue the revolution against me, Iran is no longer going to exist. Do you agree with this assessment? Do you have those same concerns?
No, that's what we call propaganda. And the mullahs and the leadership in Tehran are very, very good at psychological operations and propaganda. They're very active in that, and they use it very well. And that's why we have not had a good coordinated effort in the United States. And that's why, and one of the reasons we put together the coalition to strengthen the support there that didn't exist in the United States before. And that's very important, because if we don't do it and assist and work with others, like John said, economically, Iran is falling apart. The workers, the compensation, health alone. So when you look at all aspects of a culture, a society, how it breaks down, Iran is breaking down, but the mullahs continue to take money and support international terrorism. And as I said, what they're doing in Afghanistan and Pakistan is a whole separate story that's not talked about too much, but it will be.
John, I wanted to ask you about this coalition. Is there actual organizations who are representing the Baluchis, representing the Kurds, the Azaris? Tell me a little bit more about this big coalition that you have.
Well, the first meeting for the coalition that happened on June 9, 2018 in George Washington University in DC, it was very successful, and we have all the head of the Kurds, Baluchis, Azaris, Bakhtiaris, and Turkmen in there, and they all get together and have the coalition to be able to do something inside of Iran. And since June 9th, we've been very successful inside of Iran. And of course, few of our people, they get caught and they've been tortured. But other than that, we've been very careful. We have many different groups inside of Iran that they don't even know each other at this time. But at the due days, they all gonna get together and they're gonna get this regime out of the way.
Let me follow up on that, if I may. we did have a second meeting where we had Baluchis, Azerbaijanis, and Awazis represented. So we did have a second meeting, and that was put together by one of our Middle East experts, Colonel Najjar. From that standpoint, though, as we try to move forward, to do these kinds of things, you need funding. I would ask everybody, go to the new website we've established called Only One Iran, ONLY, Iran.com. And I think you'll see how active we are and what we're posting as far as intelligence and information. Now, everybody in the world has access to that website, so that's one very positive thing we've done. And I think John would agree, it's been very effective. For example, this show, if we get the link, we will publicize that and distribute it through that website in our 4 social media sites.
Inside of Iran, is there collaboration between different segments of the society, ethnic groups, religious groups in those protests?
Go ahead, John, if you want to answer that.
Do you think?
Yes. All the groups, especially the armed forces of Iran, except the head of the armed forces, which is the Qasem Soleimani and few other people like that, that they are the puppet of Russia and China. And that most of the Sepah-Pasdaran and armed forces, they are joining the people at this time, and we can see it more and more. For example, when there is a gathering together in Iran, some of the armed forces people, they look the other way this time. So we are talking to people and we are telling them, today be with the people, so tomorrow the people be with you, and they understand that. Most of the armed forces people, they are against this regime, but they cannot say anything because they get paid from them, and once they open their mouth, they be hanging or they be in prison, torturing. So we have all these people behind the coalition, and the world is going to see the result of that in a very short period.
General, I want to ask you, because this is a question that comes up a lot. The Iranian opposition is accused, as the same as with the Syrian opposition was accused before, of being divided. And we know that there are many, there's tension there. We know that they're not a big fan of each other, let's say. And you worked with the MEK, and now you're working with the CIOG. What do you make of this division or lack of agreement at this point?
Well, I'm the only senior general that's been inside Syria, for example. I went in twice in 2012, 2013, with 400 armed men on a covert intel operation at 73 years old. Not bragging about that, but when you have on-the-ground experience in trying to help the opposition in Syria, which I did, and still performing a plan that we presented to the Russians and to the American government called the Syrian Renaissance Plan. But the major challenge, in the Middle East is unification. Getting people and organizations to work together. It is a challenge because many of them, all they want to do is stand up for them or their organization, this. So there's been a lack of unification there. And it was the same thing in Syria when I tried to get the Syrian opposition to unify to a great degree with a lot of the expatriates with funding and money. But we got no support again from President Obama in Syria. And a lot of things could have been done. And then Russia came in, of course, and in that vacuum that was created there. And of course, now working with the Iranians inside Syria. But unification, getting individuals to work together is the major challenge in the Middle East because they don't work well together, as we say. They don't play well together. Too much infighting back and forth. Now, if we can overcome that and put everything in a positive mode, an active mode, working together, then we will have success. If we can't do that, we can't unify, then it's not going to work for anybody.
What do you answer to this, John? Because I know that I heard people from the CIOG, and I mean, they just don't like to work with Mujahideen Khalq. They say that they have a history, they don't have a popularity inside of Iran. But do you agree with this? What do you think the way forward should look like for everybody to work together against a very common, very strong enemy?
Well, in the outside of Iran is not going to happen because let me clarify something for all to understand. The opposition groups that they are outside of Iran, they mostly created by the mullahs regime. In other words, there are over 18 or 20 different opposition groups that they are saying they are against the Iranian regime, but they are created by the mullahs. They're working for the mullahs and they've been funded by the mullahs. So they are the one that they create this atmosphere that everybody is against each other. No, that is not true. The CIOG is getting everybody together and they are against the mullahs regime, and mullahs regime must go. The mullahs cannot call the CIOG. But everybody else, there is over 20 different organizations that they are calling themselves opposition of the Iranian regime, and they are not the opposition. They are working for the mullahs.
But all of them, or there's some of them who are like that, and then others who are actually anti-Iran, anti the Iranian regime?
I can tell you that over 80% of the Iranian opposition outside of Iran working for the mullahs.
That's a big statement. I mean, how can we move forward with something like this, General Vallely? I mean,
It takes a strategy, takes a vision. It takes people that understand that area, how to formulate a policy and a strategy, just like you do in battle, in warfare. And you have the right funding, the right organizations, the right people leading it that can affect change in Iran is the solution. And that's what we're attempting to do with the CIOG. Now, I can tell you, the CIOG is an umbrella. We would welcome in the senior representatives from the MEK, Madam Rajavi, who works out of Paris, Ali Reza Javarzadeh, who works out of Washington, D.C. I know them very well. But they're only a small group, but they have not created an umbrella that they should have with the other groups. So the CIOG is creating that umbrella now for the first time, to bring and unify. And again, like they say, we have open arms to anybody that will join us and strengthen the opposition groups. Again, working with the support of important governments like the United States.
I mean, I know that the CIOG, like I mentioned earlier, are connected with Prince Rida Pahlavi, who is the son of the Shah. I've been to restaurants in DC where they have the Shah's picture today. I know that there is nostalgia in Iran to the Shah days, but at the same time, it's like, are we talking about a monarchy in Iran? What type of governance are you looking to establish in Iran if you were able to get that in that position?
All right. What we are trying to do, the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, he doesn't want to get involved with this kind of aggravation at this time. The only thing he wanted to do just to free Iran first. And the CIOG's position is to free Iran first. And during the 6 months of the period, after they free Iran, they get the voting from the public. And there is two ways to do it. Just to create the voting from the entire Iran without any people that they make a false information and buy the vote from the people, to have the United Nations to be involved in that. And once the people vote, there is either going to be the monarchy or if monarchy, of course, Reza Pahlavi is going to his country and take care of his country. And if it's a republic, that's up to the people. At this time, we cannot say anything in that respect. That's what we're going to do. All we are trying to do at this time is to free Iran and have the voting and do whatever the people of Iran wants.
What would you comment on that,
Yeah,
General?
well, yes, and what John's saying, they're not going to have a monarchy again. The people don't want a monarchy, even though there's a percentage that still support the Shah's son, Reza. And John's worked with the prince since he was a little boy, and so John knows the royal family very well. But the Iranians want, I would say, probably be more like a parliamentarian type of a government. But once the mullahs are gone, then you're going to have an election in that first year. You'll have to have an interim leadership council made up of all the groups. That then can lead to an assembly of parliamentarians that can represent all the groups in Iran. And then within a year, hopefully even within 6 months, they can establish an election of recommended leaders by the people. And then you have a new government that's formed. But it's going to take 6 months to a year to form a new government for sure. But at least if the mullahs are gone, you have the opportunity to do that. And so that's the focus. I think John is representing here as well.
Mm-hmm. To let the Iranian people decide. Would you imagine a scenario where we would have a political party of the MEK and the CIOG, participating in a democratic process in Iran? Or is that something that, some people are going to refuse just because they don't want to see the other opposition be part of the system?
Well, and we don't want to promote organizations being the leaders. We're the implementers. We're the ones facilitating a change. So what I see coming out, if you set up a parliamentary or representative type of government, then you can have representatives coming from Baluchistan, Azerbaijan, Southern Azerbaijan, the Turkmens, and so on. They each have their representatives. They come to Tehran, they form this new interim government and select somebody just to be the interim president, for example. And that way you develop in the outlying provinces as well a democratic structure out there that can establish elections so everybody can be involved in selecting a new government. That's how you do this. And this is what we've laid out to the State Department as well and to others, because we've thought this thing through beyond removing the mullahs, looking into the first 6 months and the first year of how you form a new government that will be the people, for the people, and by the people, just like the United States.
Do you want to comment on this, John, or I can move to the next question?
Yes, the mission of the CIOG is to bring the people together, and after the free Iran, come with a new constitution. And of course, that constitution has to be done by the Majlis Muassasan of Iran, which is the new parliament of Iran, not and like General said, is going to be one Iran, one Farsi language, one united Iran. And the mullahs are telling the people that if we go, the Iran is going to be split in 15 different pieces. Believe me, tell your people this is not true. The Baluchis, the Kurds, the Azeris, they all want one Iran under one Farsi language and under one under one democrat government. And we are trying to do that.
Yeah. I do want to move back to the actual situation right now on the ground. The Iranian regime is definitely suffering under the sanctions economically, but we also have, the militias that are all over the Middle East, unfortunately today, the Iranian militias. We are seeing in general, you mentioned earlier that there's some sort of a coalition between right now Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Israel. How much could this coalition achieve? Is it already acting, or is that a potential project that some people are hoping to see in the future?
No, it's ongoing right now. I mean, you can see the operations that are going on the border between Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. You can see what's happening in Yemen between the Saudis down there fighting the Iranian supported groups there in Yemen. But we can see what's happening is that if you look at Syria, for example, where you have a number of countries involved, Russia, Turkey, Iran, even some of the elements out of northern Iraq were involved, Israel, Lebanon. And so, it's a very complex chessboard over there. And with the continued nuclear development program of Iran, this is very serious because no matter what you've heard about CIA reporting, they have a nuclear capability already. They have the rockets, the missile systems, they have the guidance systems. They've checked out the nuclear warheads in testing with the North Koreans. So the North Koreans have really tested out the warheads for the Iranians. A lot of people don't understand that. So you've got that nuclear threat.
So you're saying that they already have the nuclear weapon in Iran?
Yes.
It's already done?
Yes.
But that could change everything. I mean, how could you topple a regime that has a nuclear power?
Well, you got to watch them, and if there's any kind of an indicated launch, Israel is prepared with their nuclear arsenal to destroy the targets inside Iran. The United States, with its missile capability, and particularly the ships in the Gulf there, the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Gulf as some call it, North Indian Ocean, then of course in the Mediterranean. A lot of people don't realize one of our aircraft carrier groups of 10 to 12 ships with carriers, destroyers, cruisers, submarines has more firepower, nuclear and conventional, than 80% of the countries of the world. That's how powerful our fleets are. And so with overhead surveillance, satellites, drones that the Israelis have, the United States has, we're watching everything that goes on over there. So our intelligence is very good of what's happening inside Iran. So with the threat to destroy Israel, that's the primary focus now on intelligence. And even in the cyber area, collecting information there, and also with agents. For example, Mossad has agents inside of Iran, and they report back. So it's watching them very closely in their activities.
How would you describe, John, the connection of CIOG with different countries and powerful countries in the region, such as Saudi Arabia, for example?
We are trying to get in touch with some of the countries in the region. And matter of fact, me and the general, we have a meeting with the European that in a very short period is going to happen. We are working with the different countries to have all the countries of the world to be in the coalition against the regime that I'm sure the entire world wants to get rid of that regime. But some of the European countries, since they are doing business with that regime, they are still stepping back, which I'm very glad that Trump didn't step back in that issue. And I'm sure France, Germany, and England also, they're going to wise up and think twice that they have to get rid of this cancerous tumor and make the world a better place and get rid of the 80% of the terrorism. And I guarantee the entire world that once we get rid of the mullah's regime, over 80% of the terrorism is going to stop because they are not going to be funded anymore from the mullah's regime, and they're going to die and go away.
What about Israel? Because Israel also is the main country, for example, in Syria. Israel is the country that's launching continuous attacks against Iranian militia bases, military bases, shipments of missiles and other military equipments to Hezbollah. And now we know that there's an operation that's going on right now in northern Israel against the tunnels that were created by Hezbollah.
Well, the only thing that the world have to do, and the world have to also help Israel to get rid of the Nasrallah, Lebanon, and Palestinian, because this is not the way that Israeli people have to live. They're in a constant battle with this Muslim, and every day in Iran, they're shouting, death to Israel, death to America. They have to stop that. And the CIOG is on the way to do that.
What do you think, General, about this?
What specifically?
You know, just Israel's role in basically combating Iran in Syria and in Lebanon. Can Israel do it alone? Especially when we talk about the nuclear power being, you're claiming it's already, Iran has the nuclear weapon.
Well, no, they can't do it alone. That's why they need the support of the United States and others. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are very good, but you have to understand the war going on over there will be a land war as well as an air war and a missile war. So you'll have launches going on of the missiles, maybe go nuclear. Then you have the battle on the ground. And my intelligence people, we gave the Israelis the tunnel plots 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we told them Hezbollah was digging tunnels through the villages in southern Lebanon into northern Israel. And the Israelis came back and said, no, they can't dig tunnels up there. It's too much rock. We said, well, they are. And guess what just came out in the last 2 weeks? The tunnels. And so our intelligence people reported that very on through my organization called Stand Up America US. And right now we do have one of our individuals in Beirut, and he will be back next week. So hopefully we'll have some good reports there. But I can tell you the intelligence that we generate, my organization generates, it's much more valid and current than what's produced by the Central Intelligence Agency.
Lastly, John, I want to ask you, you know, I've had people from MEK before, and I asked them if they would support an American airstrikes against the nuclear plants in Iran, and or to take out the Iranian regime, and they were like, you know, they were not sure about their position on this. Probably they were more inclined to say no to an American military offense against the Iranian regime. What would your organization think of basically, you know, taking out the nuclear plant in Iran, or basically attacking the Iranian regime's, their, you know, missile system, their military capabilities militarily?
We have a lot of information that in the past we give it to CIA and Pentagon, especially some of the nuclear site of Iran, that we even give the picture to them almost 5 years ago. But since it was under Obama's regime, they didn't do anything about it. So we have a lot of information. CIOG have a lot of information about that regime that we are exposing them, and eventually is going to be the end of this regime. But MEK, talking about MEK, the people of Iran, please listen to this very carefully. If the people of Iran, they have to live with MEK or Mullah Khamenei, they're going to stay with Mullah Khamenei. And the simple reason for that is MEK was a terrorist group before 1957, 1979 in American date. And they were terrorizing all the American colonel and American officials in Tehran. And after the revolution, when there was a war between Iran and Iraq for 8 years, the MEK take the Iraqi side with Saddam Hussein and fight the Iranian people. So for that simple fact, MEK don't have no place in Iran. They are working very hard. They are spending a lot of money, but they are wasting their time.
General, I just saw that your face, you were not very comfortable hearing what John just said. Tell me, you know, how does that make you feel when they say that MEK is completely a terrorist organization?
my experience with the new leadership there, what John said is very true. The killing of an American colonel, siding with Saddam Hussein. And as I went through it, they have an annual meeting gathering in Paris each year, and they bring thousands of people in from all over to that meeting. And they've also included John Bolton, Giuliani, myself, Newt Gingrich. So they've been able to pull together enough Democrats and Republicans in America to get off the terrorist list. So they're off that terrorist list now. And the only thing I would say is they're not conducting terrorism anymore. They did, but they're not a terrorist organization anymore. But a lot of people, like John was saying, still think they are. But they have provided also good intelligence to America too, with some of the inside information they have. So I think the new, and I've told the MEK, you got to change your name, you got to rebrand yourself, and they didn't do it. And from that standpoint, they haven't progressed. Even with all these meetings in Europe, nothing ever happens. At least with the CIOG, we're moving things forward. And I said, you know, they're Iranians too, members of the current MEK. And again, they're based out of France, not the United States. So we could bring them in if there's people that are forward-looking. But the MEK hasn't done anything to bring others into their group. So there you go, not working together, not being unified. But I've met many members of the MEK over in Europe, and there's a lot of good people there today. So that's the only thing I would say to clarify the situation.
Yeah, and I see that this is going to be an ongoing discussion. I'm glad to host people from CIOG at this point, because you know there is a demand by the people to hear every opposition group from the Iranian opposition side. And I want to thank you so much, General Vallely, for being with us again. Once again, I've had you before, and I'm so happy to have you on again. Thank you so much, John, as well. And you know, looking forward to having more discussions about the ongoing situation in Iran and knowing the activities of CIOG. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
That was it for tonight's episode. Thank you for sticking with us. Good night.